Let's now dig into the contract, the inspection, and the closing process. So these are things that if you don't have a realtor, you will be doing all of these different things yourself. So pay really close attention and understand that this is basic, honey. There's a lot more to it than the things that I'm sharing with you. This will give you a good big picture, and it will give you a good basic understanding that you can build off of. And the best way to learn about real estate, I will be saying it in every video, is by doing it. Because there's no amount of reading, there's no amount of watching videos, there's no amount of mentoring that will really help you understand the process. There's only you taking the time, taking the effort to actually go through it. Buying a property involves several critical steps. You need to understand these steps in order to ensure that you are making an informed decision and you are avoiding costly mistakes. The first thing you need to understand is that this is your purchasing agreement. It will outline all of the terms, the price, the contingencies, the deadlines. You need to review carefully everything. You need to review the financing. You need to review the home appraisal. You need to review the home inspection, right? All of these things is so that you can protect yourself from any disasters the sellers could be hiding. So you need to really make sure that you are reviewing that contract with an attorney if needed. Usually working with your realtor for most deals that you would do, your realtor will have access to an attorney that they're going through the whole process. I never personally worked with an attorney, but I trusted my realtor and I trusted the closing company that we chose because they had an amazing lawyer that was reviewing all of the documents. That's just me, right? I tend to buy conventional properties. When I bought one time, I went through a distressed property purchase. I did bring on a separate lawyer to make sure that everything was ironed out. It was costly though. Here are some of the key documents that will be included in the contract. The offer letter. This is the letter where you and your realtor are signing it and you're officially making the offer to the seller. You will need your seller disclosures. This is where the seller is disclosing anything that could be a red flag with the property that they are aware of. By law, they have to disclose certain key things. And if we find them, I'm going to try to put some pictures over here of what the offer letter looks like, of what the disclosure letter looks like, and what the loan statement would look like. I will try to look for mine and I will put them here, right? So the offer letter, the seller's disclosures, and the loan estimate. The loan estimate is when you are working with your lending officer to make sure that your interest rate is there, how much you pay in closing costs, how much you pay for inspections. They have highlighted all of that already, so you have real clarity of how much this whole thing is going to cost you, okay? I want you to be aware of earnest money deposit. These funds show your commitment, but they can be forfeited under certain circumstances. So you need to really understand how much is going to be that honest money. Usually your realtor, they will understand the area, they will understand the market. When I bought my first property, when the market was kind of lukewarm, I barely put down $500 of earnest money. But honey, when I bought in the middle of the pandemic, like a little bit post-pandemic, when everybody was buying houses and nothing was available, people were putting $50,000 cash above market value, cash offers. Girl, that $500 was not acceptable. People were putting 10, 15, 20, sometimes even $50,000 earnest money. Yes. Because the earnest money, though, allows you to almost put the house on hold. And if you don't actually move forward with buying the property, you forfeit that earnest money. So let me tell you something. Your realtor will work with you to really try to understand what type of market you're in and how much is a good amount to put down for earnest money. But legally, different states will have different expectations for earnest money. You need to understand what are the timelines for your due diligence. This is important, right? Do you have 7 days? Do you have 14 days? Do you have a month? Usually, I think when I did mine, it was only about 7 to 10 business days. That is usually common, right? You need to understand the financial approval process and what the closing is going to look like. So you will sit down with your realtor and you will make sure you ask them questions. Well, what does the timeline look like? When do we do this? When do we do this? And when do we do that? Some realtors are better at educating their clients than others, right? When it comes to your contract, you need to be paying attention to clauses related to repairs, price adjustment, appraisal contingencies, so that you can avoid any unexpected issues. After you do your inspections, which we're about to cover next, how long do you have to do repairs? You need to make sure your realtor highlights all of this for you. And how long do you have after that to negotiate a price adjustment? Now that you have a basic understanding of the contract, let's talk about your home inspection. A professional home inspection will help you identify potential issues before closing. So some common inspections include structural integrity. Yes, you need to understand that that house will still be standing after 30 years of you having that house, okay? You need to understand the plumbing. You need to understand the electrical, right? How healthy is the electrical, the plumbing, any type of pest management. We had to do some termite assessment, right? Does the house have any termites? Because that's a big one for the area that I was buying in. Because trust me, honey, you don't want termites. If any major issues arises through that inspection, and I will do a separate video sharing the inspection process in detail, you can renegotiate or walk away based on your contract contingencies. Some properties may require additional inspections. You might need to do a radon testing, mold assessment, sewage. I had to do a sewage assessment because I had a septic system. And the truth is, some sellers may refuse to make repairs in that process. Usually, it's all about the negotiation that you both have. My parents recently purchased a duplex that needed a lot of work. But the duplex was purchased at a significantly lower price. So any extra repairs that were identified in the inspection process, the seller was like, I'm not going to do it, right? It really turned into a big fight. We had a great realtor. My parents had a great realtor who went in there and really negotiated on behalf of my parents. They ended up closing on the deal. And as we speak, they just put the second unit on the market. My dad renovated the whole thing himself. And when the seller refuses to make any type of repairs, you need to decide, is this property still worth keeping, or do you need to determine whether or not you want to withdraw from the deal, right? So that would be a decision only you will be able to make. Is the deal worth it that you're willing to put up with whatever the inspection determine or things that needs repair? If it's things that are small that you can easily fix, it's not worth it. But when it's one of those big five, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, roofing, or foundation, cut your losses. You need to review the final inspection report. You need to make sure you go through it carefully with a fine-tooth comb. If you are lucky and you find a good realtor, you will sit down and you guys will go through that inspection report one by one. My realtor was fantastic. She really took the time to be like, we need to work on this, we need to work on this. She took the inspection report and then created a separate report with everything we needed to have the seller fixed. These are all things that a realtor will be taking care of on your behalf. So for all of the people who think that realtors are not worth their money, for the administrative manual task of them doing all of this, it's so worth it. We talked about the contract. We talked about the home inspection. Now let's talk about the closing process. You need to finalize your mortgage and ensure that all required documents are submitted. This is why a great lender is just as important as a great realtor, because they are working together and they are working side by side. We're working with the realtor to make sure that the house itself has all of the T's dotted, all of the T's crossed, all of the I's dotted. But then from the financial side, You need to be working with a really good lender to make sure from the financial perspective, because honey, let me tell you something. You could have the perfect deal. You could have the perfect house. But if the money, the loan is not written right, it's not formatted correctly. By formatting correctly, what I mean is that sometimes there are creative options that are available based on your situation, right? Let's say your credit score doesn't meet certain requirements. Some lenders who are experienced know how to work the magic behind the scenes to make sure that you end up getting approved by the bank. And that approval process, especially post 2008, requires sometimes some creativity from your lender. So you need a really good lender that you can trust. You need a good lender who has experience working with your specific type of situation. Let's say you are a self-employed person with a high credit score, but you don't have the typical 9-to-5 backing of a W-2 job. Do they have experience working with somebody with those challenges? Let's say you have a W-2 job and like me, you have 4 other properties, right? Does your realtor understand how to manage all of that? How to really understand Airbnb income, right? Midterm rental income, long-term, like how to navigate all of these different strategies, because your situation may be a little bit more. So they will make sure that all of the documents needed are submitted, that it's formatted correctly, it has the right information. In this final process, it's also really important that you have a final walkthrough to check that all of those repairs you guys agreed on in that inspection were actually made. And you also want to make sure that the property is in expected condition. Closing day will involve you signing a lot of legal documents. Your hands are going to fall off, okay? Because it's going to be rather thick with all of the things that you would need. We will need to sign a lot of legal documents. We need to also transfer ownership on that day. I do have to say this. Don't sleep on that final inspection. My very first property, I signed the document. I was so to be a first time home. I was both proud and nervous at the same time, right? Because I knew I wasn't buying the perfect property, but I was still excited. I signed the paperwork. My realtor did not show up. Yes, pick the right realtor. My realtor did not show up. Thank God one of my friends who is now a realtor herself, an amazing realtor, did show up on that day, lended me a lot of support, and we got the keys. We drove from the place where we're doing the closing to the property. I walk in, I do my walkthrough, go into the garage. The whole ceiling was on the floor. Do the final, I'll leave it there. The key documents that will be included here will be a closing disclosures, a promissory note, a deed of trust, title insurance policy. So your closing disclosures will have everything that's pretty much a breakdown of all of the costs, okay? Promissory note is pretty much going to be a document that you will sign that says, hey, you promise. Like here, the closing disclosure will be like, hey, here's everything that you will owe us, right? For the past 30 years, your money is coming to us, baby. And then the promissory note simply says, yes, I agree to pay you guys my paycheck. 40 to 60% of it, whatever that amount is going to be. And the deed of trust pretty much says, hey, here, I own this house. But technically, because I owe you money, you okay? So the deed of trust just said you technically don't fully have the deed to the house because the bank technically owns your house, right? So that deed that you have, it has a caveat, right? And then, of course, you will have your title insurance policy. And with the title insurance policy, this is really important. The title company needs to make sure that they really do the research to make sure that that property belongs to the person who is selling it to you and that they have the right to sell it to you. And this is why you doing everything in real estate can be so cumbersome, especially past the 2008 crash, because there have been people who kind of took matters into their own hands because they were like, oh, it's such a great deal. So and so, I'm just going to buy it directly from them, only to realize that, hey, that person who sold you that house technically doesn't really own that house because of this, and that. The right research wasn't done, right? So you want that title insurance because if you have that, that title company will be liable because they didn't do their right research. And in general, there are closing costs, and most of the time the closing costs will be anywhere from 2 to 5% down, and that will be in your closing disclosures. And if you are lucky, right, back in the days, it used to be common, but now it's not so common. The seller can pay for your closing costs. That is an option. So your realtor will know whether or not that is a point of negotiation. And it's also important that you understand this, right? Closing part can take anywhere from 30 days to 60 to sometimes 90 days. There are things that can delay the closing. So you yourself need to make sure that all of your ducks are in a row. You need to make sure that your realtor and your lenders also have their ducks in a row, because there are so many things both of them can do to F you out. And there are also things that you can do to F yourself out if you don't have your paperwork ready. I've been through this closing process almost 6 times, so I know between buying and refinancing, I know all of the paperwork that I need. My lenders and my realtors are always so shocked. I was like, I'm not here to play. I'm not here to play. I have a folder with all of the documents that they need. The minute that lender calls me, I was like, I will have this to you in 5 minutes. If I can get it in 5 minutes, I'm getting it to you by the end of the day because I don't want any delays. Okay? Because last minute lender request or appraisal discrepancy can significantly derail your closing process, right? You need to make sure that your funds for the down payment and closing costs that need to be wired are wired properly, and always make sure that you're verifying all of your bank details with your lenders to avoid fraud. Now, after you've closed on your property, you need to check. I have lived at places, so for example, in Colorado, it just automatically transferred everything. So in Colorado, we buy your property, we close on that property, the change of deed happens, they already know that now this property belongs to this person, and they make the change. You don't have to do anything. That was the first time it happened to me, and it was so glorious, but most places won't have that. You need to actually make sure that everything is transferred. All of the utilities are transferred, because if not, they might even send you a bill. Or I think that I've seen situations where certain title companies will put some money aside for those bills and utilities. I thought that was very interesting, right? It's like, well, in case you don't change this, we will pay for it out of pocket so the seller doesn't have to. So we've talked about whether or not you need a lender. We talked a little bit about the inspection process, the buying process, the closing process. I also talked a little bit about the importance of you finding the right lender. You need to make sure that just like that you do your due diligence with your lender. I never go with the first lender I talk to. I always make sure that I have 3 to 4 lenders to guarantee that I actually get that loan. The right lender will fully understand your situation, and they will.
Before you go, follow me on my other platforms. On my business channel for career, business, and money strategies to build your corporate exit strategy. On my lifestyle and travel vlog for the real life behind the strategy. And on my podcast, From Corporate to CEO, for daily side business tips and motivation. But the real work happens in the community. This is where we support each other and build this together. Same values, same season, and same direction. I'll see you there.